Do you remember the first time you saw your favorite band play live in concert? Of course you do. And I'm sure it's a memory that you'll cherish for as long as you'll live. And that was most definitely the case for me when I attended my first Iron Maiden show 33 years ago. So let's just hang out for a while and I'll tell you all about this life-changing experience. Iron Maiden had just released their latest album, No Prayer for the Dying, on October 1st, 1990. And though it received mixed reviews from fans and critics, I really liked the album from the opening notes of Tail Gunner to the fading notes of Mother Russia. I understood what they were going for in terms of sound and vibe, and I understood why they needed to make an album like that at that stage in their career, and at what I recall being a rather pivotal time in history. My first Maiden show should have been the Seven Sun Tour, but I didn't get to go that one, and I think what happened was that I had planned to go with two of my cousins, but by the time we asked our parents if we could go and they agreed, the show was sold out. So when they announced this new tour, I wasn't going to miss it again, and we ended up getting tickets pretty early on, and I was absolutely freaking out that I was finally going to see Iron Maiden. Especially because at that point in my life, I was watching the Live After Death and Made in England VHS tapes pretty much daily. On top of that, I was learning how to play the songs on guitar so that I could play along with the album, and some days I'd pan it to the right speaker and be Dave Murray, and others I'd pan it to the left speaker and be Adrian Smith. How many of you did the exact same thing? So the date of the show was January 15th, 1991, and the venue was the legendary Montreal Forum. I grew up in a suburb called Rivière des Prairies, which means River of the Prairies. I'm not sure why it's called that since it's not in the prairies, but we just call it RDP. This was me back then. Check out that wild mullet action. Respectful Italian boy in the front, all heavy metal in the back. Anyway, RDP is located in the far east end of the island of Montreal, and it's a very Italian neighborhood, which is probably why it's so poorly connected to the rest of the city via public transit. Every household has more cars than people. So getting to the old Forum meant walking 10 minutes to the bus stop that went straight to the Green Line subway station in about half an hour, and then it was about another half hour on the subway to get to Atwater Station, where the Forum is. So a good 75 minutes to get there, and then we'd have to do the same thing again to get back home. Not the end of the world, but needless to say, we would all sign up to get our driver's license right after our 16th birthday. Once we got to the venue, we could all feel the kind of excitement that could only be felt at a metal show. And let's not forget the concert smell, which was essentially a very precise mix of hash, weed, beer, and hormones. Throughout my teenage years, I never felt quite so much in my element as when I was at a metal concert. We got to our seats, section 223, row D, and my seat was number 10. I still have my original ticket stub. Well, whatever's left of it anyway. Back then, the doorman used to just rip them any old way, and I have tickets where you can't even make out which band it was that I saw. And as you can see, I am wearing the original tour shirt I bought that night. It's in pretty bad shape after 33 years, but it's still intact. And the following day, all the rockers in my school were wearing their Maiden tour shirt, and we were all super hyped up about the show. And the image of a bunch of high school kids huddled together in a big circle wearing Maiden t-shirts and talking excitedly about last night's concert is one I will never, ever forget. The opening act was Anthrax, who were supporting their then latest album, Persistence of Time. I was a fan of their music as well, and they were actually one of my favorite thrash bands. I can't remember much other than thinking they sounded really good, and that I really liked the look of the stage, which was based on that really cool album cover. When it was time for Iron Maiden to take the stage, the place went dark, except for what looked like multiple red position lights, and the theme from 633 Squadron started playing. That gave way to the album's opening track, Tail Gunner, which I thought was an excellent show opener. It's got a great build-up in the intro, and the way the verse comes in is so explosive and intense, it just got the adrenaline flowing and had the crowd going absolutely crazy. Next was Public Enema No. 1, which is a very melodic, yet remarkably angry song for Maiden. Hearing the intro harmony played live felt amazing. As did the chorus. I love that chorus. Dave Murray also has a wonderfully slick and melodic solo on that tune, and it was great to see him play that live. That led right into Wrathchild, which fit perfectly with the vibe of the album and tour. I think it was at that point that my friends and I looked at each other to acknowledge we were actually at an Iron Maiden concert. It was a little overwhelming to realize that I was really there watching and listening to this music being performed live by Iron Maiden in the same room. The set also included Die With Your Boots On, 22 Acacia Avenue, The Clairvoyant, and Heaven Can Wait. And back then, there was no way for the average kid to know the set list beforehand. So every one of these songs was an exciting surprise. From the No Prayer album, they played Tail Gunner, Public Enema, the title track, The Assassin, Holy Smoke, and Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. That's quite a bit of new songs, and you could tell that the guys were genuinely excited about the new material. That was actually one of the things I had not really anticipated. You see, in the live footage I was familiar with, Steve and Bruce were quite animated on stage, but the guitarists were fairly static, although they always did look cool. But new guitarist Yannick Gers brought so much energy and intensity that he just lit a huge fire under all their asses, not least of all Dave Murray, who, compared to Live After Death, looked like his pants were on fire. The solos were a bit more free-flowing than they sounded on past tours, although they still stuck to the basic structure of the originals. They just added an element of spontaneity. Now, the trade-off, of course, was that they weren't as cleanly or precisely executed. But this is something you notice more when you listen to the recordings after the fact. To most of us in attendance, it just felt like Dave and Yannick were really playing with a lot of fire and passion. The pair also had great chemistry right from the get-go. And this was a big deal because fans were very attached to the duo of Dave and Adrian, and we knew that their bond on stage was irreplaceable. But with Yannick, it felt surprisingly natural, and it was obvious that they were having so much fun playing together. Nico was having the time of his life, and that really came across in his message to the fans in the tour book. Look at that face. So he talks about the energy level on stage being way up because the focus was more on the band than the stage show, and also how they were hungry again and playing as if the band had just formed. Steve Harris just felt really intense. Perhaps the best way I could describe it is that his sharp focus and determination came across in his performance, which was, to say the least, very physical. I recall Bruce having a bit of a cold, so he was being just a little careful with some of the higher notes, but he still sounded great overall, and he gave a fantastic performance. If you watch the videos of the shows from even just a week later, he sounded absolutely incredible. He also spoke French most of the time, which resonated exceptionally well with the Québécois audience. Québécois is basically French-Canadian, for those of you who don't know. And that's something about Bruce I've always admired. He's always come across as genuine and respectful to the audience, with a true sense of gratitude and appreciation. It's a big part of Iron Maiden's ability to resonate with fans all over the world across the decades. Highlights of the night, for me, were 22 Acacia Avenue, Heaven Can Wait, Public Enema No. 1, the title track, and Hallowed Be Thy Name. The reason, for me, was that they were songs I really liked and that were performed with a particularly high intensity. In the case of 22 and Heaven Can Wait, they were also very unexpected surprises. The stage show was much toned down compared to the 4 previous tours, which had become more and more elaborate and ambitious. But the band more than made up for it with a much more lively performance and a more direct interaction with the audience. Something that did not look that great were the 2 Eddies. especially the one behind the drums that appeared during the song Iron Maiden. That thing looked like a character from Fraggle Rock. And if you're old enough to remember that show, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The standing Eddie that walked around during the song No Prayer for the Dying just looked rather poorly designed. It was boxy and it moved across the stage slowly and awkwardly. I mean, it was okay, and it wasn't any less fun. It's just one of those things where the concept matters more than the execution. But yeah, they were not the best looking Eddies. But even as a teenager who had spent countless hours watching videos of the band's most legendary tours and looking at the magnificent photos of their incredible stage sets in Ross Halfin's book, What Are We Doing This For? And as a side note, this book has some great pictures in it. Look at this. This is a standing Eddie. But even then, I didn't miss any of that because the band was so engaging and so real, it felt like Iron Maiden in its purest form. And of course, this was my first time seeing the band, so I was just so much in awe and so thankful for the opportunity that I couldn't have cared less about any of that. And you have to understand, back then, we were not used to rock bands having any sort of longevity. There were those who died young, those who felt they'd reached their peak after a few albums and went their separate ways, bands who couldn't keep it together due to the heavy toll of the rock and roll lifestyle, and other bands whose members' egos and character flaws broke them up in their prime. So for me, Maiden had been at it for over 10 years and had put out 8 back-to-back studio albums, many of which came with massive world tours. I was just happy they were still together making music I enjoyed. Seeing them so energized and hungry, like a brand new band, was all I could ever have hoped for. Never in my wildest dreams could I have even remotely imagined that I'd still be seeing this band play live many, many more times after that. Even as far as 33 years later. How about you? When was your first time seeing Iron Maiden? I'd love to hear all about it. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more licks of the beast.